Let's not forget the Bundesliga here. Bayern have, been put back where they belonged for so many years, to the very top of it. They've won the Bundesliga, Andy, there are so many consequences of this. Let's start off, first of all, with whether Bayern are back where they belong and where this leaves the rivalry with Leverkusen that we've seen over the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, I mean, firstly, I think the rivalry with Leverkusen is useful to contextualise it, because people will be sitting there, a lot of people will be sitting there going, oh, well, yeah, Bayern always win at some point, don't they? 34th Bundesliga title.
We used to think so.
But they for the first time, really since Klopp's Dortmund, they've been in a proper title race 2 years in a row. Now, obviously, Leverkusen have faded a little bit in recent weeks, and we'll get to the reasons for that in a little while. But I think the fact that not just because it's the first title that he's won, the first major title that he's won, it was a glorious sight on the socials on Monday, seeing a quite clearly hungover Harry Kane. He's waited a long time for that. And of course, there'll be a lot of focus here on him and Eric Dyer. I think it's not just that it's the first title for him, but there's a sense that, yeah, we've had to motor against worthy opposition. And Vincent Kompany has been a big part of that. You know, it's not been a bad Leverkusen at all this season. Of course, they've not quite hit the standards of last season, and it was almost impossible to do that 2 seasons in a row. To not bottom out, I think, after last season, after the perfection of it, the intensity of it, I think is all credit to them, especially as they came back into the Champions League, and particularly through the group stages, gave a really, really good account of themselves. Should have ended up, of course, with the DFB Pokal, but got knocked out by third tier Arminia Bielefeld in the semis. It has been a worthy season from Leverkusen, and that tells you how much better Bayern have had to get. Now, of course, Michael Olise has been a part of that. Joao Palhinha has not been nearly as much a part of that as people expected him to. So what does this tell you? This tells you that Vincent Kompany has done a great job, despite being, 8th, 9th choice for the job. But it's turned out that he has been a really good fit for Bayern by almost being a quite un-Bayern-like coach. So you know what it's like, FC Hollywood, everyone's got an opinion, or maybe 10. And what he's done really well, I think probably more than any Bayern coach since Hansi Flick, and I'm not quite putting him on the same level there yet, because of course he's not a treble winner, he's managed to shield the team from all the drama of it. He's managed to get them doing the basics very well. He's created a very healthy, holistic environment. He's such a skilled communicator, and I think that's a massive part of it. Now, are there a few holes in it? Yeah, I think there are, because you look at the start of the season and they look defensively really on it. They've looked less so in 2025. Part of that's due to the personnel. Part of that's due to injuries. And he's had a worse hand in terms of defensive availability than Tuchel, Nagelsmann, any of those. And they faced a lot of the same defensive difficulties and couldn't deal with them at all. But I think you look at Kompany at the end of this and you think, this is a guy actually that, even though he wasn't their ideal guy from the off, and I don't think they knew who their ideal guy was from the off, because they sounded out so many different types of coaches. Of course, they sounded out Xabi Alonso himself, Ralf Rangnick, a lot of other coaches of all different types. But almost by accident, they've ended up with a guy who I think could be their coach for a while.
Yeah, he may be their coach for a while, Nicky, but one person who probably won't be in from all the reports in any case, being the Bundesliga coach in next season is Xabi Alonso, Leverkusen's coach. Does the title victory by Bayern Munich, does that underline his departure now?
I think it's not necessarily impacted the departure. I think he was leaving, whether or not this is a successful season. So I suspect he would have preferred to ride off into the sunset with another league title, as everyone always would. It was interesting, wasn't it, hearing even Granit Xhaka saying, it's not wanting to make it an excuse, but it's, I think he phrased it as, it's always easier as a player when you know what's happening next season, isn't it? It's something that's sort of like that, how you phrase it. It's always a little bit more straightforward, but he didn't want to deflect onto that. So maybe it's had some small impact on Leverkusen this season, but I think nobody could begrudge Alonso wanting to have that opportunity. I think he's earned it. I think absolutely, as Andy was just saying, the quality of this Leverkusen side, in fact, not that they will enjoy this, but it will make that Bayern title feel more meaningful, that make it feel more like something worthy of celebration. And I suppose the one worry now, maybe it's more than one worry for Leverkusen fans, but the fear for the league is, well, if he goes, and then potentially there's talk of Munich coming in for Wirtz as well, the classic Munich thing to do, just come and scoop up the players from anyone who's got close to challenging you, let alone toppling you as he did last year. It just creates that worry that it might be already the end of an era in that regard. But I think, yeah, it sounds very likely that that's where Alonso's headed, and I don't think you could begrudge him it.
Yeah, and I think they always knew that Xabi Alonso would go, so that they've always had a plan and a shortlist for going after that. I think actually one of the most interesting names being linked, we've seen Erik ten Hag linked as well, Cesc Fabregas, and they've had exploratory talks with him already, because
Cuomo boss at the moment. Obviously.
Yeah, and it's funny. Obviously, him and Xabi Alonso come from a similar place in terms of philosophy, but have taken it in very different directions. So I can't imagine the football being quite as sexy under Fabregas. Although if he's got a different squad, maybe it's about leaning into the qualities of his squad, and maybe it will be quite exciting football under Fabregas if Fabregas were to go to Leverkusen. Of course, they're not the only team interested in him. Leipzig also interested, Roma, a few others. But I think institutionally they're very strong. So there's continuity from Fernando Caro, from Simon Rolfes, there's the sporting director and CEO. But if both Alonso and Wirtz go, in football, perception becomes reality really quickly. And there's that feeling that it might fall apart, could easily make it fall apart. I think that's what you've got to look at. And that would be a real shame for what has been a really, really worthy rivalry. Now, look, realistically, it shouldn't be sustainable. Not only have Leverkusen got a smaller budget than Bayern, they've got half the budget of Dortmund. And I think it's made Dortmund's problems more acute, really, over the last 2 years, that lots of people looking at Dortmund at close quarters were like, well, hang on, why can't we make this happen? And really, I think that's all credit to Leverkusen and how smartly they've managed it, as well as what a good job Alonso has done and how good his players have been for him. But obviously, if Wirtz does go to Bayern, and even 3 or 4 months ago, this looked incredibly unlikely. It looked like he would sign, independently of Alonso's future, an extended contract at the club and look to go after the 2026 World Cup. But of course, nothing sounds louder than silence, and it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. They haven't quite got the ink on the paper. And now, but Bayern have been making their moves in the shadows for quite a long time. It looked like they couldn't afford him because it's going to be a massive fee, absolutely massive wages, and they have just spent a lot of money re-upping Musiala on a new contract, Alphonso Davies, Joshua Kimmich. It's at that sort of time, and that's the reason why they're offering Leroy Sané, for example, such reduced terms at the moment. But they're dipping into the emergency fund, it seems, to buy Florian Wirtz because they're so obsessed with the idea of getting him. Now, they want to pair him with Musiala, like as happened in the national team, and maybe Julian Nagelsmann, that's kind of his gift to his old club, opening up the eyes to the fact that is possible. But I don't know, is there a part of you that thinks if Bayern are going to go and win the league, go and win the Champions League from here, obviously we look at the front parts of teams, and we've been talking about it earlier when we were talking about the Champions League, and that's the beauty. That's the bit that gets us all excited. If Bayern don't sort their defence out, they're not winning the Champions League. And so, to me, it makes me think that they're possibly spending an extraordinary amount of money to, as Nicky says, in old money, to kill the domestic competition, but not necessarily get where they want to go internationally. So I wonder if this is a bad thing for the Bundesliga and a bad thing for Bayern in terms of going on and being a genuine competitor to win the Champions League again?